this doesn't nullify the other opinions, because it may have relevance for us as Muslims in a more spiritual sense, in a deeper sense, and for the mushrik perhaps in a more shallow sense, but still it has some relevance to him. And maybe the first thing that doesn't come to the mushrik's mind is angels. The last thing you want to think is that the mushrik heard Quran and they said, what is that talking about? I don't get it. No, the Quran was very relevant da'wah to the mushrik. It was directly talking to him. And this is what baffled the mushrikun, that it was speaking to them in clear, bilisanin arabiyyin mubin, in clear and clarifying Arabic speech. So one more example of this before we go on to just wrap this subject up, inshallah. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, يَعْلَمُ مَا يَلِجُ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَمَا يَخْرُجُ مِنْهَا. He knows what enters into the earth and what comes out of the earth. When the mushrik hears that, what's he thinking? He's thinking of the rain going into the earth and the plant coming out of the earth. This is as far as his imagination goes. But when the believer hears that, there's more going on. There's deeper knowledge. And the deeper knowledge is, no, we also will go into the earth and we will also be coming out of the earth. So it's the same statement, but people are understanding it at different depths. So these are not contradictory statements I'm putting before you. These are at different levels, or different audiences are getting different levels of the same statement, appreciating different things. So Islahi's argument and others, basically the summary of it is, this is perhaps how the mushrik processed it. He thought of the winds. And then how would he then understand the rest of the message of the surah? But we keep the interpretation of the angels still, of course, as valid and majority. Anyhow, وَالنَّازِعَاتِ غَرْقًا. Finally, the evidence that is suggested among some scholars that this is referring to the winds is Allah Azza wa Jalla says, إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ رِيحًا صَرْصَرًا فِي يَوْمِ نَحْسٍ مُسْتَمِرٍ تَنْزِعُ النَّاسَ. The word tanzi'u in the Quran, to snatch and yank out and pull out, has been used for rih, has been used for wind. So he uses this as further supporting evidence. Anyhow, so if it is winds, then what this means is Allah is swearing by hurricane or tornado winds that yank trees out of their roots or buildings out of their foundations, like it's digging deep into the ground and pulling them out, plucking them out right away. Right? And on the other hand, if this is referring to angels, it's the angels that are diving deep into the body and they are pulling and ripping the soul out that wants to stay inside the body. This is the soul of the kafir. وَالنَّاشِطَاتِ نَشْطًا. And then nasht in the Arabic language, it refers to undoing a knot without making any effort. It refers to undoing a knot without making any effort. Another way nasht is used is when you have a loose knot and you kind of leave the animal and it wiggles a little bit and kind of gets undone by itself without any effort. This is also where nashata is used. So this is maf'ul mutlaq, which means these winds or the angels, if it's referring to the angels, it's referring to angels that seamlessly enter the body and take out the soul. Very smooth process, like the undoing of a loose knot. No force necessary to apply. And if it's referring to the winds, it's referring to smooth breeze. The breeze that is a source of calm and peace and even pleasure on the face of the one experiencing it. So two contradictory kinds of wind, if this is wind, right? The winds that are a means of destruction and the winds that are a means of comfort and a means of even relaxation, of course, especially in desert life. Then Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَالسَّابِحَاتِ سَبْحًا. This, if referring to the angels, it's been interpreted as, sabh, by the way, literally means to swim quickly or to swim in a rapid, smooth way. You know, you can swim and you're splashing and it's not smooth, but when you're swimming smoothly, then this is sabh, okay? So this perhaps is referring to the angels as they dive in, and they're diving inside the body of the person. That's how some ulama have commented on this, that they swim into the body seamlessly and they're looking for the soul and they're going to pull it out. Others have commented, no, if this is the wind, these are the clouds that are swimming in the air, floating in the air by means of the clouds that are, or the winds that are pushing them. And then finally, فَالسَّابِقَاتِ سَبْقًا. Then the word sabaq is actually in the reference to race. When one thing is taking the lead over another, this is فَالسَّابِقَات. And there's a tha there, if you notice, those of you that are following along. What this means is it's connected to وَالسَّابِحَات. So وَالسَّابِحَاتِ سَبْحًا فَالسَّابِقَاتِ سَبْقًا are together. The others are separated, and we already knew that there were opposites, right? An-Naziat وَالنَّازِعَاتِ غَرْقًا وَالنَّاشِطَاتِ نَشْطًا were two very different kinds of wind, or very different kinds of angel situations. So they're separated by a waw. But وَالسَّابِحَاتِ سَبْحًا فَالسَّابِقَاتِ سَبْقًا is necessarily a process A and then B. A being وَالسَّابِحَاتِ سَبْحًا, B being فَالسَّابِقَاتِ سَبْقًا. So the angels are racing back, taking these souls, racing back for their judgment, Also the clouds, if you from the view of the Arab, he will see the clouds, some of them moving faster than others, some of them taking a lead over the others. So this was part of the view of the Arab. فَالسَّابِقَاتِ سَبْقًا. And then finally, فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا. This is a very powerful statement and should be understood both ways. One in terms of the angels that we spoke of, and also in terms of the interpretation that it's wind. First of all, let's look at the word tadbir. The word mudabbirat is an ism fa'il from the word tadbir. Tadbir includes the meanings of planning, organization, executing a matter. It's complete, execution. And it's similar, it has contrast with another word that will come in this surah, where Allah says, ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ يَسْعَى. It's a similar word, but it's a different structure, and it creates a different kind of meaning. But for now, understand, tadbir is thorough planning, thorough organization, thorough execution of a plan. So Allah is swearing by, again, these sabihat, and فَالسَّابِقَات, this continuing these three, that these are the ones that execute the command of Allah, amra. Amran being the command, maf'ul bihi here. So Allah swears by those who execute the command of Allah diligently and in an organized fashion. If this is referring to the angels, it is the angels that are assigned different tasks by Allah Azza wa Jal, and they do a diligent, organized job of executing those commands. If it's referring to the clouds, as is the case in Surah Al-Mursalat, we find وَالنَّاشِرَاتِ نَشْرًا فَالْفَارِقَاتِ فَرْقًا. Okay? There also we find the winds, they distribute clouds in every direction. And these clouds are racing against one another. What else does the wind distribute? The wind also distributes dust and pollen. Also, by means of the winds, the clouds that are distributing, the clouds are going to bring rain. So if you think about it, winds are the means by which life is sustained on the earth. Everything you need for life on the earth is plant life, and plant life can't be sustained without pollen, which is now delivered by wind. And on the other hand, the rain from the sky, without which plant life can't exist, the clouds are delivered by the wind. So Allah has executed this organized plan of delivering these clouds. Some places won't get any, some places will be dried up and become places of death and famine, and other places will be flooded with water, other places will turn into lush gardens, all part of an executed plan from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of these plans being executed by means of the wind. So this is the other interpretation of فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا. There are other words for planning that we should know about that are used in the Quran. So we use the word tadbir here, mudabbirat. Then we find the word kaid also. Like Allah says, فَإِنْ كَانَ لَكُمْ كَيْدٌ فَكِيدُونَ. Right? Also we find وَكَذَلِكَ كِدْنَا لِيُوسُف. What's the difference between tadbir, which is planning, and kaid, which is also planning? Kaid is actually a secret plan. The fundamental element in kaid is secrecy. So it's a plan which you don't want anybody else to find out about, because part of exposing it will be to spoil the plan. It won't be any good if it comes out in the open. Another word used for planning is makr. And makr has an element of conflict in it. A plan that necessarily has to do with retaliation against an enemy. And when Allah is used with makr, like وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ, it's only used in the retaliatory sense. Meaning whenever Allah mentions that He's planning against an opposing force, it's always mentioned that they took the first step. They did makr first. So وَمَكَرُوا first, and then وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. So there's a difference. We don't typically use makr with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unless in that reaction to the makr that was done by the wrongdoer to begin with. Then finally we have another word, hila. Hila, like وَالْوِلْدَانِ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ حِيلَةً. Hila is a kind of plan that you make to... nowadays there's a lot of hila in society, by the way. It's a clever plan. It's a clever plan. The idea of which is to maximize one's benefit or minimize one's harm without breaking the law, but at least trying to bend it, manipulating the system, working around the system. So accountants are really good at hila, for example, during tax season, right? Some of the scholars spoke about hila in the ancient times, in the times of Islamic rule, that the person would give all of their wealth as a gift to their wife right before zakat season, and then they would make the wealth gifted back to them after zakat season is done. So this was a kind of working around the law. Don't get any ideas, but this was the kind of hila that was done before. Anyhow, so these are different kinds of plans. Allah Azza wa Jalla specifically mentions فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا here, which the word includes planning, execution, organization, diligence, and actually means taking a step back before you take an action, because it comes from dubr, which is the back of something. And it's to turn back from the affair, think it through, and then come back and can execute it. That's the interpretation of the word tadbir. Anyway, now that Allah Azza wa Jal has taken an oath by these few things, وَالنَّازِعَاتِ غَرْقًا, by those who dive deep in and yank out, وَالنَّاشِطَاتِ نَشْطًا, those who sail smoothly, like the undoing of a knot, then, فَالسَّابِحَاتِ سَبْحًا وَالسَّابِحَاتِ سَبْحًا فَالسَّابِقَاتِ سَبْقًا, those who swim or float effortlessly, seamlessly, those who race one against one another diligently, and then finally those that plan or execute the affair with thorough planning. After all of these oaths, Allah Azza wa Jal moves on to another subject. And yes, last time we talked about the subject matter of Quran, paragraphs in the Quran, incredibly organized in the sense of even their rhyme scheme. So the first few were oaths in the Quran and they all rhyme. So if you recite them, you will hear the rhyme scheme. وَالنَّازِعَاتِ غَرْقًا وَالنَّاشِطَاتِ نَشْطًا وَالسَّابِحَاتِ سَبْحًا فَالسَّابِقَاتِ سَبْقًا فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا. Now if you look at the next few ayat, you'll just hear it even. Even if you don't read tafsir, you'll hear it. يَوْمَ تَرْجُفُ الرَّاجِفَةِ تَتْبَعُهَا الرَّادِفَةِ قُلُوبٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَاجِفَةٌ. You hear the scheme, right? Because it's a united subject. So even phonetically it's united, subhanAllah. Now we come to this next part, but before we do, understand that when an oath is taken, there's what you took an oath, but now you want to say something. Like I swear by X, I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to do this part. What am I swearing by? What is the statement that I'm about to make? That is actually hadhf here, it's mahdhuf here. It's not mentioned. The reason it isn't mentioned is because this is a part of a series of surahs where it has been mentioned. And it forces us to look at the tafsir of this surah in surahs that are similar to it. So for instance, you find وَالْمُرْسَلَاتِ عُرْفًا فَالْعَاصِفَاتِ عَصْفًا وَالنَّاشِرَاتِ نَشْرًا فَالْفَارِقَاتِ فَرْقًا فَالْمُلْقِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا عُذْرًا أَوْ نُذْرًا, and then جواب القسم إِنَّمَا تُوعَدُونَ لَوَاقِعٌ. All of those oaths were taken for what conclusion? No doubt about it, whatever you have been promised is bound to occur. Whatever you have been promised is bound to occur. That conclusion is understood here because it's part of that chain of discourse. It's understood that when they hear these oaths, the next thing to expect is resurrection. But Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't spell it out, which has benefits. One of the benefits is it forces you to look at other texts in the Quran. Al-Quran yufassiru ba'dahu ba'dan. The other thing it forces to do is the person who hears oaths, they're expecting to hear what are these oaths about. What's he going to talk about? So now they're in more anticipation of what is to come. But Allah doesn't give them what they were expecting, so they keep on listening. They're still haven't figured out what exactly is this thing about. So now Allah Azza wa Jalla speaks about the depiction of the day of resurrection. Here, before continuing, understand a contrast with Surah An-Naba. In Surah An-Naba, in the beginning we had عَمَّا يَتَسَاءَلُونَ عَنِ النَّبَإِ الْعَظِيمِ الَّذِي هُمْ فِيهِ مُخْتَلِفُونَ. There was a depiction of the skeptic. They're asking each other, what is this, when is this going to happen? And Allah threatens them, they will soon find out. And then He starts talking about the hereafter. So He spoke of the skeptic first and the hereafter second. In this surah, He reverses the sequence. Here He mentions the hereafter first, and He will mention the skeptic later. يَقُولُونَ أَإِنَّا لَمَرْدُودُونَ فِي الْحَافِرَةِ. That's later. So there's a reversal. This actually in Arabic literature is a mechanism called al-laf wa nashr al-aks. That you fold something up and then you unfold it in its reflection or in the opposite. So you know how the mirror, if you put an object before the mirror, they're exactly the same except they're organized opposite. You lift your right hand, the mirror's lifting the left hand, etc. Right? So that's the idea here. One surah is organized one way, and this will do the flip organization of the ideas presented in Surah An-Naba in many ways, one of which is this. يَوْمَ تَرْجُفُ الرَّاجِفَةِ. Rajif in Arabic is related to some other words. Inshallah, we'll discuss some of these words. The first thing to note is Rajif has to do with rattling or shaking. Okay, and there are a bunch of words in the Quran for this. And it's important whenever you come to a word that has other synonymous terms in the Quran that you should highlight the differences between them, because it gives clarity to one particular text over the other. Other words that are used in the Quran, for example, zalzala, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. The origin of that word is from zalla, which means when someone's feet slip. And zalzala, because of the repetition of the phonetics, in the sounds, it actually alludes to repetition, meaning someone's feet keep on slipping. When does that happen? During an earthquake. That's why it's called zalzala, because one's feet keep on tripping up. So that's one. The other is zaj. Raj. Sorry. إِذَا رُجَّتِ الْأَرْضُ رَجَّا. Right? Allah Azza wa Jalla